Yes, there have been upgrades, but the core structure is pretty much the same, which has been in place. There are more features and more capabilities which have been coming up in the recent years. But that's kind of like Marketo 2.0. Why I am talking about features is because I want to share some of the features which I think can impact your day-to-day workflow and your career if you're looking to explore a career option inside marketing automation domain, specifically in Marketo. And before I talk about features, I also want to take a minute to share an important point that if you are a regular user of Marketo, most of these features might not be very new. And if this content is public, this video is public, this knowledge is public, and I'm only trying to make it easy for you, and it's only going to improve with time with more people contributing to this content. And all it does for me is like it builds my credibility, hopefully, in this domain. That's basically it, right? If this knowledge becomes so common, what is your differentiation? Before we answer this, I also want to mention that features are important. It's also not like, because these features are not going to impact my credibility or my proof of that I have the skill, let's skip it. No, you can't do that. You need clay to use clay. And no, I'm not talking about the clay you're thinking about. It's important, however, it's also incomplete if you don't build something useful with it. Marketo is very similar to clay. It gives you a playground, a framework. In a sense, most successful platforms give you a framework. They don't lock you into features. They give you an environment to do things to achieve your goals. Marketo isn't the application built on Python, it is Python. Therefore, your differentiation is what you do with it using your imagination. It is what you make of it. That's your differentiation. The natural question here is like how to build that unique imagination, how to achieve that imagination. I think that imagination is a result of critical thinking. Critical thinking is a result of exploration. Exploration results from awareness of new perspectives, and perspectives come from an open mind. In Marketo, you use these features to bring your imagination to life. It supports a diverse set of functionality to bring your marketing ideas to life. Whatever you imagine, it's practically possible all the time. Create operational programs, nurture programs, event programs, or simple email blasts. Incorporate A B testing, split sequence of nurtures, like do anything you want. For Marketo programs, I also talked about Marketo programs in more detail in another video. Do check it out. It's called Marketo Made Simple. In this video, we are going to talk about some journal features of Marketo to help you get familiar with the UI of Marketo. This video has relatively more screen recording, so for illustrations of features I am talking about, so it would be a good idea to watch it instead of listening to it. But even if you are listening to it, there's good value packed into this talk. So let's start. List uploads. Your method to acquire audience makes a lot of operational impact. By operational, I mean that there is so much tactical things which go into the way after a record is created into Marketo. If you make a mistake at the entry point of your platform, it will travel through the journey of the record. It will impact all other things and it will compound over time. And the complexity of marketing operations is that it's an interconnected web of simple and powerful systems. Yes, I said simple. If you look at scoring program, it doesn't looks very complex on its own. The vanilla models are pretty easy to understand. The complexity arrives when there are many of them. Um, I mean, like not many of scoring programs, there are many of operational programs, and they are connected to each other and they build a whole ecosystem of Marketo operations. And if we extend it outside Marketo, they build an ecosystem of marketing operations. Just for an example, if I change one point or one simple setting in a smart campaign for a lead scoring program, it can cause frustration in sales because they may start to get more useless or less useful leads as a result of this action. Modification in one node impacts all others. The best strategy is to usually get it right the first time. When your data is created, of various sources of data in Marketo, list upload is a big one. In fact, this is so big that it's huge part of a lot of projects, and some projects are all about nothing else but list uploads. It surely deserves some care. You need a CSV file to upload into Marketo. You can have as many columns as you want into the spreadsheet. You basically map the column names to the field names you have in Marketo and then basically hit upload. It's a basic functionality, but a widely used one. So I just thought to start with this one. You can upload a list and you can also upload directly to program. Like you can basically upload to a static list or a list simply, and you can also upload it directly to a program. Although do be careful with the compliance aspect. While in most countries we can upload data with softer regulations, some regulations like GDPR require more affirmative demonstration of consent. It's important to have some legal basis to demonstrate compliance. Please note that this is not a legal advice. And then try to have data for all mandatory fields you're going to use, like whichever are relevant for you to increase the effectiveness of marketing strategy. There are many data enrichment tools and cleanliness strategies which you can use to make sure that you are actually practicing good hygiene before you upload your list to Marketo. And it's also wise to use anything which maintains a good data health. Marketo supports the Excel format for uploads as well. Marketo started supporting the Excel file format as well recently, but I recommend CSV because in most technical systems, CSV is usually the preferred way because it's lighter and basically because like most of people understand it. It's like very compatible with systems as well. Um, and technically, it's an integration. You map the data from the columns of your spreadsheet to Marketo. Okay, let's go to the next one, subscribing people to a list. So this is an interesting one that you can actually subscribe people to your list to receive notification of whatever that report or list is. Like if you want to send a report of how many people were active last week, you may want to push active people to a list and basically subscribe. And what this would do is this would actually send that whole list to your manager. And if you want, it can also give the download link. You could do it in lists. You could also do it with reports. It's a good feature because when you want to share data with stakeholders who don't know Marketo, but this is still valuable, like you want to send weeklies or monthlies, it kind of automates the process and saves you a lot of manual labor. And that's basically it. And then let's talk about the basics. Setting up an audience criteria in a smart campaign, I think we already talked about it, but it still is worth of time in this video. You can basically describe the criteria of your audience for qualifying for different workflows, or what we call them in Marketo smart campaigns. The calculation of qualified audience is real time. The smart campaign calculates the size of the audience which qualifies for the criteria at the present time. Let's also talk about a brief use case. You want to add active people to a list. And in this case, you can define the criteria like who are those active people, and then you define the action item in the flow steps to add them to a list. And then if you want, you can basically subscribe anyone to receive that, maybe weekly or every Monday, without logging into Marketo. You could also push them to sales via CRM integrations. Okay, next, conditional visibility on a form. This is basically an ability to enable conditional visibility of one field based on what is selected in another field. So it's based on a response on another field. This may feel very usual functionality, but I think it's a good one, especially because it gives you a chance to optimize one of your key data sources. Remember that, like I told you, if you make a mistake at the entry point of your database, it's going to impact a lot of things and compound over time. Optimizing and fixing your sources is one of the best things you can do to have a good life in Marketo. Okay, then we want to talk about personalization using dynamic content. And we have done some user groups to talk about this in more detail. I'm doing one in few weeks. Do check that out. Do you notice how you can select the language of your choice while you watch Netflix or even YouTube? This is called localization in marketing. It's not a digital marketing concept per se, it's actually a marketing concept. Let's spend a minute to learn a bit about localization. Think about the brand ambassador of Coke in India. Coke hires him because he is relevant for the local market. He represents local languages. He represents local culture. Any market can be categorized into different groups: language, age groups, spending habit, basically data which tells you the nature of that audience. And now let's double click on email category to come back to the discussion. You want to send an email, but you want to send a different email to a different segment. You want to send a different email to people who are seniors. You want to send a different email to people who are engineers. Now, there can be different ways to segment things, and if you do it in the vanilla way, you are going to turn up into a lot of emails and a lot of complexity. Marketo actually enables you to create different email versions in one email itself, so that when you are selecting that send email step in the flow steps, you only need to select one, and on the back end it's going to send the version meant for the segment you configured inside the email itself. It's called dynamic content and it's based on segmentation. Essentially, dynamic content and segmentation, they exist in tandem. None of them can exist independently when we are talking about dynamic content. Okay, next one, let's talk about Email Blast. This is a dedicated program to send one-time emails. It has a feature to A/B test and send emails in the time zones of audience, which I think is pretty cool. And in addition to this program, there's a dashboard to view performance, and you can also switch over to different views. Like you have a control panel, you have a summary tab, and one interesting thing about time zone emails is that many people kind of don't realize that this functionality cannot move time back. It's the reason why you need to schedule it in advance. Let's talk about scoring. There are different types of fields you have in Marketo, and yes, it is about the field. And one of this type is called a score in Marketo, this type of field which allows you to basically store numbers, and then there are flow steps in Marketo which kind of allow you to make calculation on these numbers. We call it change score. Ever notice that you need to mention plus or minus or equals to when you use the flow step called change score? This is the whole feature. Lead scoring is what we can build with it. Like that's your differentiation. Let's get to the next one, which is the global form validation rules. Sometimes you don't want spammy or less useful traffic. There are days when you can see junk data can start to fill your database. That's when such a feature helps. You can basically enable validation in admin settings and block email addresses domains to fill out the form. However, it only applies to domain. If you want to block specific email addresses, you do need to add a custom JS to the web page where you have placed the form. And then let's talk about Campaign Inspector. Campaign Inspector, which gained popularity with time, was really a hidden gem. But if you have not tried it yet, Here is why it makes things pretty easy. Sometimes when you are analyzing workflows, knowing how the smart campaigns talk to each other is pretty helpful. And with this, you sometimes need to know which other smart campaigns has the same triggers or filters or flow steps, because you're kind of like drilling down into like what this whole ecosystem is about. Campaign inspector allows you to export these smart campaign details with all the details about the triggers and flow steps. um, and basically you can use that to have a whole picture of what is happening. And you can even take a snapshot by creating a pivot in Excel, that okay, how many of triggered campaigns are active, how many are batch campaigns. And it also gives you a picture of like the volume of things you are doing with Marketo at this point in time. Timeframes allow you to look at how your campaigns perform during one duration versus during another. Example, you made a change and now you want to show the impact. Compare the performance report for this month with the last month, this quarter with the last quarter. And reports maintain the counts even if the email addresses have been deleted if you're not using the smart list. I know, like, now that we have simplified this concept, it might look very simple, but it's not when someone is struggling to understand that why are some records not being shown on the report. It's basically because if you query the database by asking it to filter. Next, let's talk about the search filter, a pretty quick way to find your work. There are dozens of types of things to search in Marketo: lists, smart lists, like there is a whole deal of it. This filter basically gives you a way to narrow down to search for what you are looking for. And I think it's a pretty solid functionality. It's not a direct functionality, but it's good for a user to navigate into different areas. And because we are talking about navigation, I want to talk about the another feature which is called history. No, you don't need to open all those tabs in your browser. If you close off all those tabs and focus on one, I can guarantee you that you will get more done in less time. Yes, you can move and navigate within Marketo just by going to the history area, which is way more natural in my opinion, instead of moving across tabs, because it also kind of drains your mental energy because you are switching context. Next is calculation of dates using system tokens. Okay, we talked about scoring. Do you know that you can also calculate dates in future just using system tokens? It was something I discovered during experimentation. Adding any number to system tokens is actually going to calculate dates, which is very useful in some scenarios. Data retention is one example. You can also apply this to more scenarios. Next, export rules of a smart campaign. If you happen to work on Marketo projects, you know that there are a lot of smart campaigns. And if you are early in your career and learning Marketo to grow your career, one comment I usually get for my suggestion to try and understand what's beneath the surface is that it's complex. Yes, it's complex. That's what makes it a valuable skill to learn. Uh, Actually, not like it's the relevance which makes it valuable. But even then, complexity does plays a part, I think. Okay, leave it. But how do you know how to do it? By understanding the rules. Also, let's acknowledge that workflows are the future of apps in the upcoming era of RevOps. Marketo just happens to call them smart campaigns, but it also means that if you know smart campaign workflows, you're also prepared to understand a lot of tools in the upcoming era of RevOps. There are two key ways to understand workflows or smart campaigns in this case. One is by going through the UI, looking at the smart list, looking at the flow steps. Other is exporting the rules. Now, exporting the rules is very easy. You just go to the smart campaign and you have this icon of an export. When you export, you basically get a spreadsheet with all the details of that criteria and the actions, and even the settings of that smart campaign. And I think that is pretty quick way. um, I hope someone builds an app or an agent uh, which basically explains what is a smart campaign doing in natural language. um, and it would be a very good idea. And here's a quick hack. If you are working with the non-Marketo users, which is the case in lot of times, just start using the term workflows instead of smart campaigns. You will be surprised that how effective the communication becomes. Because most people don't understand Marketo, and I think it's very genuine. Marketo is built for specific set of users. Not everyone should need to know about what is a smart campaign. Workflow feels way more natural. Okay, and the next one is landing page redirect rules. Okay, I think this might be a simple feature, but it's a good one. You have created a landing page. Now you want to redirect it. You have already promoted it, or there is some scenario where you cannot update it and you want to push people to a different landing page. So you can basically set up a redirect rule in admin section, and that landing page can go to the URL you defined. That's all for this video. I hope I was able to share something valuable. Talk soon.